Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture we're going to look at lifecycle management with S3.
This is a demo and you will need to log into the AWS console. Okay, so here I am in the AWS console, and as always we will find S3 under storage. So go ahead and click in there. And we're going to open up our bucket that we were using in the last lecture, so my version control demo. We're going to go in here. And then what we want to do is go over to management. And in management, we can find our lifecycle rules. So let's go ahead and create a lifecycle rule. So we'll call this rule, we'll just call it main lifecycle rule, something like that, lifecycle rule. Now, note that you can choose a rule scope. So you can limit the scope of this rule using one or more filters, and the filter could be a prefix. So it could be a subfolder in your bucket. So you could say, hey, only do this to the images of subfolder inside my bucket. Or you can say this rule applies to all objects in the bucket. And if you do that, you have to acknowledge that it's going to apply to every object in the bucket. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now in here, this is where we determine our lifecycle rule actions. And the more of these that you click, the more options you get down the bottom. So let's go through each one. So we'll start with the top one. So transition current versions of objects between storage classes. So let's say that we have it just in our standard, and after 30 days, we want to transition it to standard infrequently accessed. So we can go ahead and do that. We can transition previous versions of the object as well between storage classes. So we might want to do that 30 days after that object becomes non-current. And that just simply means that there's been another version, a newer version that's been done over that. We could expire current versions of objects. I'm not going to do that. Or we could also do permanently delete previous versions of objects. So let's go ahead and do that. And what we'll say is, hey, after it's been a previous version, let's say 60 days after it's been overwritten, we want to delete that version of that object. And in here, we can actually add in more transitions. So this is the current version. So after 30 days, we're going to put it into standard infrequently accessed. And then maybe we want to move it over to Glacier, and we want to do that, let's say, after 60 days. And then in here, you've got to say, I acknowledge that. So essentially what's happening in here is you put in fact, there's a really good summary down the bottom here. So in here, we've got current versions of our objects and previous versions of our objects. So day 1 or day 0, we upload our object. 30 days later, it's transitioned over to standard infrequently accessed. And then 60 days later, the objects is going to transition over to Glacier and be archived off. With our previous versions of our objects, basically when the object becomes non-current, 30 days later, we're going to move that over to infrequently accessed, and 60 days later, we might want to go ahead and permanently delete that. So you can cut this in a lot of different ways using your lifecycle rule actions, and you can add in transitions under each one. And then you get a summary of what's going to happen in here. And once you're happy with everything, you go ahead and create the rule. And that has now created a lifecycle rule, which is across the entire bucket. If you don't want it, you can edit it or delete it as well. And that's how lifecycle rules work. And you'll always be able to find them under management in here, lifecycle rules. So let's go on to my exam tips.
So my exam tips. Well, just remember what lifecycle management is. So it basically allows you to automate moving your objects between the different storage tiers. It also can be used in conjunction with versioning. So you don't need versioning turned on, but if you do have it turned on, you can use it in conjunction. So you can do it with your current objects as well as previous versions. And like I just said, it can be applied to current versions and previous versions as well.
That's it for this lecture, everyone. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, feel free to move on to the next lecture. Thank you.